on the Breakfast Club trying to make me look like trying to make me seem like a sucker for love type of dude, and ain't nothing like that.
Fredro Starr. I got one on Baby Most. Right, so I land in Cali. I see him in the club. You know, he a little loud. Yo, son, what up, baby? Yo, that nigga. Yo, good man. Yo, who shorty? Yo, stuff, son. You got that? That's you. Yo, nah, son, I'm saying that's all you, baby.
Starr thought he had chaos figured out until he crossed paths with DMX. What started as a brotherly vibe on tour slowly twisted into a quiet showdown over style.
DMX was dangerous, man. Like, not dangerous, but he's like, when you around him, he's like, you don't know what's gonna happen. You know what I'm saying?
Respect and who really ran the room. Cypher after cypher, the tension stacked higher and higher until DMX finally decided he was done with the whispers and the side eyes.
Let him know ain't nothing sweet over here, and that's it, man. Ain't nothing to talk about. Ain't no beef. X know me. You know how to get at me.
And when X addressed something, he didn't talk things out. He shut everything down in the most raw, public way possible. But this wasn't just some studio disagreement.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, it's going front. Oh, son, it's nothing. I mean, yo, bad baby, it's nothing. You know, she ain't nothing.
Meanwhile, he fall in love with you.
So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Behind the curtain, DMX was moving through real danger in real time, dodging problems way bigger than rap. So when Fred tried to test him, X didn't just bark like people expected, he bit for real. Let's break it down. When DMX first crossed paths with Onyx, this wasn't through no polished business meeting or fancy industry introduction. It happened because they were simply in the same gritty spaces at the same time.
And you had to be thorough to come in the studio tape.
So who
it was just locked down.
Who made
like
it
that.
in the studio? Who got it in?
Nobody.
It was just
at that point, nobody.
This was the mid-90s. New York's rap scene was basically a battlefield where every MC was trying to prove their voice hit the hardest. Onyx already had that wild energy locked in, bald heads, black Tims, heavy scowls, and an attitude that made studios feel like battle rooms. Their sessions were a fortress. No outsiders, no jokes, no friendly energy whatsoever. Fredro Starr always said it bluntly. You couldn't just walk into an Onyx session, you had to be thorough.
He could have been a missing Onyx member.
Guys.
He could have been a missing
Somebody
Onyx
told Fredro the L shit. What they said?
They said DMX is Onyx all together.
So when a young DMX from Yonkers stepped into that Jersey basement studio in '95, nobody expected anything special. But the second he started spitting, the whole room shifted like someone opened a freezer door. Fred remembered that moment perfectly. DMX had that same ice-cold intensity that Onyx built their whole brand on. Sticky Fingers would even joke later that DMX might as well have been the fifth Onyx member. His voice, his rage, even the way he attacked the booth, it all felt like he belonged right next to them. And that was the problem. When two forces come from the same cloth, the friendship doesn't come easy. Competition does. By the time they linked up officially in 1998 for Shut 'Em Down, both sides were already in their final forms. Onyx were seasoned vets, shaped by the rough early 90s. Def Jam grind. DMX was the rising alpha, fresh off It's Dark and Hell is Hot, running wild with unstoppable momentum. When they stepped back into the studio together, there was no warm welcome, no small talk, just heavy beats, thick smoke, and enough tension to cut with a knife. Fred later admitted he knew exactly what kind of track they were making that day. This wasn't a feel-good collab. This was a full-on lyrical boxing match. Every verse sounded like somebody trying to take somebody's head off. And when Shut 'Em Down finally dropped, well, the world heard that energy instantly. The energy between them was straight wild. Two styles that should have clashed ended up boosting each other like gasoline and a match.
Every stage, DMX driving tour buses.
How you gonna say he's driving the tour bus?
Driving the tour bus.
Instead of canceling out, their aggression blended into something raw and electrifying every time they touched a stage. That same intensity almost turned dangerous during the survival of the Illest tour. You could feel that uneasy respect in the air, not beef, but that sharp tension you only get between two men who see too much of their own spirit staring back at them. Fred once said, when you're around X, you never knew what was gonna happen. And he wasn't exaggerating. One minute, DMX would be backstage praying with the crew, calm and focused. The next minute, he'd be outside revving a tour bus engine like he was getting ready to drive it straight through the parking lot. Everybody stayed on alert around him, not out of fear, but because that man carried a spark so unpredictable it could flip the whole room in seconds. Still, beneath all that volatility, there was a real bond in the mix. Fred and DMX were natural fighters, men who moved with heart before logic every single time. On tour, They'd drop down in hotel lobbies for push-up battles, roast each other non-stop, and compete in anything just for the thrill of it. It wasn't some fake industry friendliness. It was that raw, chaotic respect born from living life at full speed. When the tour wrapped up, the energy didn't end. They weren't calling each other every day, but the connection was stamped in stone. Brothers in spirit, built from the same rough material, both walking into every room like they owned the air in it. Fans could feel it too. Anytime they performed Shut 'Em Down live, the crowd knew something electric was happening, like things might explode into something unforgettable at any second. But behind all that hype, there was an unspoken code. Both camps lived by the same rules: loyalty, authenticity, survival. DMX never threw shade at Onyx. He always showed love. Even when the industry tried to stir up tension between them, the respect stayed there.
Fredro Starr. I got one on Baby Mosley. Man, to LA and Cali. I see him in the club. You know, he a little loud. Yo, son, what up, baby? Yo, he that nigga. Yo, shorty. Yo, stuff, son. You got that? That's yours. Yo, nah, son, I'm saying that's all you, baby.
But under the surface, the same fire that made them so powerful together also made their bond shaky. Because with men like that, men who build their whole identity on dominance, friendships are intense, but never guaranteed to last. The moment things shifted into something personal, something unspoken, all that brotherhood could flip into rivalry overnight. People try to trace the fallout between DMX and Fredro Starr back to a diss track or a radio jab.
And she spoke very little English. She wasn't even a citizen. But, you know, thanks to the baby, now she's a citizen.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah. God bless
Helping
America.
women all over the world.
God bless America. Yeah.
But the real spark lit up long before the public heard anything. Almost a decade before that 2012 blow-up, the foundation was already cracked. It goes back to around 2002, when DMX was in the middle of his Hollywood wave and Fredro was still one of the people he considered solid in the industry. What was supposed to be a simple night out turned into the first fracture between two men who once moved like brothers. Fredro had pulled up to a premiere with a woman he described later as a shorty, just someone tagging along for the night. And in his own words, he even gave X the go-ahead, told him, "That's you, son." In street terms, that's a green light, permission, a friendly pass, no pressure. But with DMX, nothing ever stayed that clean or simple. Fast forward almost 10 years later, DMX goes on The Breakfast Club and tells the story like it was a comedy sketch. He painted Fredro as some jealous dude blowing up the woman's phone all night, asking if she was still with him. DMX delivered it with jokes and wild energy, and the whole room laughed. But then, X added a whole new chapter. He said the woman ended up pregnant. According to him, she barely spoke English, wasn't a US citizen, and supposedly got citizenship because of the child. The way he said it was messy, reckless, and disrespectful. A story that should have stayed locked away forever, not turned into a punchline on national radio. For Fredro, hearing it like that wasn't just embarrassing, it was betrayal. In his version, he said, "Everybody laughing, everybody thinks it's a joke, but when my name came up, I didn't take it as a joke."
When DMX came out, everyone said, man, he's a copy version of Onyx.
That moment hit deep because it wasn't just about the woman. It was about loyalty, respect, and pride. And to really understand why it cut so sharp, you gotta look at DMX's pattern. X had a habit of taking private chaos and turning it into public theater. A few years before that, he did the same thing with Monique Wayne, a woman who'd taken him to court over paternity in 2004. To fight that case, DMX went to the press claiming she had assaulted him while he was asleep in a hotel room, a claim that shocked everyone and stirred even more controversy. With DMX, real life was always tangled with performance, and this time, the punchline came at the cost of someone he once called his brother. DMX even went as far as mocking Monique Wayne's looks, saying she wasn't attractive enough for him to even remember being with her. It was cold, reckless, and way out of line.
Your man X on The Breakfast Club trying to make me look like trying to make me seem like a sucker for love type of dude, and ain't nothing like that, you know what I'm saying?
And it came back to hit him hard. Wayne sued for defamation and walked away with a $1.5 million judgment after X didn't even show up to court. That ruling made something crystal clear. DMX's habit of turning private drama into public entertainment didn't just hurt feelings. It hit his pockets too.
X know me, you know how to get at me, call me, man. That's who you gotta do. But ain't no games over here, man.
By 2012, X still carried that same wild, impulsive fire. His Breakfast Club appearance wasn't some calculated jab. It was instinct, pure X energy. He thought he was just telling a wild story for laughs, but in reality, he dug up a wound that never healed. Fredro had kept quiet for years, never speaking on the situation, never flipping it for clout or interviews. But the moment DMX dropped his name on a national show like it was some comedy bit, he crossed the one boundary they both understood: respect. And underneath that personal sting,
No written nothing. No Blackberries, no iPhones, none of that. We don't do that over here. So check this out.
was something even deeper, an artistic tension that had been simmering for years. Fredro and Sticky Fingaz had both hinted, quietly at first, that DMX's signature growls and barking weren't original.
If he ever tried it again, he'd be in of the firing pin.
They believed Onyx had brought that raw, animalistic delivery to the game long before X hit the mainstream. Sticky even jumped online and asked fans, was DMX a copycat or a big dog? It sounded playful on the surface, but anybody who knows hip-hop knew that question had weight. Because in rap, authenticity isn't a detail. It's everything. It's the whole currency. It's how you survive. And for DMX, authenticity wasn't part of a persona. It was his persona. Every growl, every bark, every gritty verse was straight from his spirit. So to say he copied someone else wasn't just shade. It was like trying to tear down the core of who he was. That's the one accusation he would never tolerate. So when the Breakfast Club story collided with those old Onyx comments, the situation blew past gossip territory. Now it was battle on two fronts, personal and creative. Fredro felt disrespected as a man, and DMX felt disrespected as an artist. It's wild when you think about it. Two men who had almost identical energy, almost identical hunger, almost identical fire, ended up clashing over who sparked that flame first. Fredro's first reaction to the disrespect was surprisingly calm, measured, but sharp. In an interview, he laid it out straight. Yo, he tried to make me look like a sucker for love type of dude. That's not me. He using my name to catch laughs, and it ain't funny. Fredro didn't deny what happened. Yeah, there was a woman. Yeah, she was just a jump off. That part didn't bother him. What cut him was the disrespect. In their world, there's an unspoken code. You don't drag another man's name into your personal chaos, especially not on national radio for millions to hear. Fredro said it plain. He know me. He know how to get at me. You don't go on no radio show and talk like that. For most people, DMX's story would have been just another viral X moment, another wild, unpredictable clip to laugh at and repost. But to Fredro Starr, this wasn't entertainment. This was a line being crossed, and he wasn't about to let it slide. That's why, just days after DMX's Breakfast Club appearance, Fredro popped up online. No entourage behind him, no fancy studio, no dramatic lighting, just Fredro in a hoodie, standing in front of a mic with that ice-cold stare. On his Firestar 16 Bars web series, he dropped a freestyle that made it crystal clear who he was talking about. His voice stayed calm, but the message cut deep. Yo, it's your boy Fredro Starr, he said. We going off the top this week. No Blackberries, no iPhone, straight raw. He didn't scream, he didn't rant, he didn't even say DMX's name. Instead, he responded in the language their world respected. Bars! It wasn't about starting violence, it was about restoring balance. Where they come from, you don't play with another man's name, his pride, or the people around him. And even though outsiders called it a diss, Fredro wasn't chasing clout. He explained later it wasn't beef, it was a warning, a line drawn in the sand, a way of saying, don't ever play with me like that again. But to everyone watching online, it looked like a full-blown declaration of battle.
DMX had Fat Joe so angry, according to these documents, that he went to see them on a live and he actually put some effort into this happening.
DMX, though, he didn't flinch. He didn't record a diss track. He didn't address it in a freestyle. He didn't even hop in the booth. Instead, he went to TMZ, the last place anyone expected a street legend like DMX to fire back from. And that's where he shut the whole thing down. No crew behind him, no hype, just one of the coldest dismissals ever caught on camera. TMZ asked him about Fredro's freestyle, the threats, the smoke, all of it, and DMX barely even blinked. DMX smiled, stared straight into the camera, and dropped it cold. I ain't worried about him. He's a midget. He can't even reach my knee. One sentence. That's all it took to flip the whole situation upside down. In an instant, the firing pin talk vanished. The tension evaporated. What sounded like a street warning suddenly felt like stand-up comedy. DMX turned a whole challenge into a size joke. and somehow it hit harder than any threat. But it wasn't really about height, it was about hierarchy. X was basically saying, "You're not my equal, you're not even close enough to touch me." Then he leaned in and delivered the knockout line that crushed Fredro Starr's entire tough guy image. All he is a sitcom Moshe gangster. He should stick to being a reality gangster because that's all he good for. It was brutal and flawless. Everyone in hip-hop knew exactly what he meant. Fredro wasn't just a rapper, he had a whole acting resume. He starred in Clockers, Sunset Park, and even The Wire. But the world remembered him most as Q, Brandy's clean-cut boyfriend on the 90s sitcom Moshe. The nice dude moms approved of. The safe character. DMX grabbed that polished image, the one that made Fredro a household name, and flipped it into the ultimate street insult. Calling him a Moesha gangster made every threat Fredro threw out sound scripted, like he was reading leftovers from a canceled TV episode. And the hit landed because it came from something real. In hip-hop, when the truth gets weaponized, it cuts the deepest. Commentators caught on to the insult immediately. One host even said it straight. That nickname was gonna stick, and it did. The same streets that once saw Onyx as untouchable pit bulls and Black Tim suddenly looked at Fredro like he was a sitcom rebel trying to flex tough. DMX didn't need to bark back. He didn't need to threaten anyone. He simply laughed Fredro out of the conversation. That's psychological warfare at its finest. Fredro came with aggression, but DMX came with embarrassment. And embarrassment hits way harder. That's what made X so dangerous, not just his growl, but the way he could shrink someone with a single sentence. But here's what makes that silence from X even louder. DMX's real life was filled with people who actually lived the street life, people who didn't need cameras or freestyles to prove anything. DMX was surrounded by the kind of men Fredro always claimed to be, and X never hid from that reality. Around the same time their back and forth started heating up online, Real Danger was following DMX everywhere he went. One story later revealed in court documents claimed that Fat Joe, another heavyweight out of New York, had ordered his own crew to confront DMX after a heated argument in Miami. According to the lawsuit, the order was simple and fatal.
DMX was dangerous, man. Like, not dangerous, but he's like, when you around him, he's like, you don't know what's gonna happen. You know what I mean?
If he acts up, take the hammer. Meaning plain and clear, if DMX resisted, shoot him. It never reached that point because X didn't step outside that night. That one choice might have saved his life. And it wasn't even the only close call he faced. His name stayed floating around real violence, real conflict, real danger. Years later, Fat Joe himself told another wild story, this time about being with DMX in Angola, where they got hemmed up by a local warlord named Ruo. This wasn't some movie villain. This was a man so feared that hotel staff wouldn't even make eye contact with him. DMX, already living a chaotic life in the States, suddenly found himself halfway across the world, caught in a real hostage situation, held by someone responsible for actual bloodshed. For DMX, gun talk wasn't rap entertainment. It was the soundtrack of his real life. So when Fredro Starr went online rapping about firing pens and crying over funerals, DMX didn't twitch compared to what he'd already lived through. Lawsuits, real threats, abductions. A YouTube freestyle wasn't danger. It was background noise.
Came back with a blunt rolled up. And as I'm counting the money, he likes the blunt. Like I said, I was impressed. I don't really smoke, nigga. At it. And he passed the blunt around. And, wow.
So he laughed. He called Fredro a midget. He called him a Moesha gangster. And then he moved on like nothing happened. Across forums, blogs, and early YouTube comment sections, fans argued non-stop over who won the exchange. Some said Fredro's freestyle was the real deal, that he brought back that classic raw Onyx energy from the 90s. Others said DMX buried him instantly with one sentence. Sitcom Moesha gangster. That line spread everywhere. Basically a meme before memes even existed. Meanwhile, Fredro looked furious in interview after interview, trying to explain himself, trying to clear up the jokes. But the problem is, once you become the punchline, there's no smooth way back. Hip-hop magazines jumped in too. XXL, The Source, Hip Hop DX, they all ran quick write-ups. Most of them short, straight to the point, but every single one of them repeated the same nickname that Fredro wished would disappear. But the tone was obvious. DMX wasn't beefing. He was shrugging it off. One journalist summed it up perfectly. Fredro's dissing for clout DMX is living through court cases. And that was the truth right there. Fredro's anger lived online.
The Hard Knock Life tour, then the Rough Rider tour. But that one right there, that's the one where I was like, what the fuck is this tour? Like, I want to go to one of these shows.
In videos and interviews, DMX's chaos lived everywhere else. In courtrooms, in addiction programs, in real confrontations that could have taken his life. Fans eventually noticed the difference. Fredro was performing the lifestyle. DMX was trying to survive it. That's why X's silence shook people. He wasn't ignoring Fredro because he was scared or because he felt superior. He simply didn't have time to entertain someone acting tough when his real life was already 10 times tougher. Onyx tried to cool everything off later. Sticky Fingers and Fredro both called DMX family. They said X was unpredictable, high energy, but never fake, not once. Sticky told a story from the old Def Jam tour days, how all the artists shared buses, hotels, sometimes even rooms, just to stretch the tour budget. He said the label sold that family angle for marketing, but behind the scenes, it actually felt real. They fought, argued, competed, but underneath it all, it was love. But for a while, Fredro couldn't walk it back publicly. He'd said too much on camera. He had to stand on what he said. Still, you could hear it in his voice. The heat was fading. Most of his anger came from pride. He didn't hate DMX. He just refused to be disrespected. And he even said in a later interview, "It wasn't beef. It was something I had to check out of respect. We grown men. It's all love." That was January 2014, a year and a half after the blow-up. Fredro Starr quietly buried the hatchet. Meanwhile, DMX never mentioned Fredro's name again. Not in a verse, not in an interview, not even as a side joke. It was the ultimate dismissal, almost like the entire situation never happened at all. And that silence became part of the legend. Even years later, when Onyx members looked back on that old Def Jam era, you could hear both nostalgia and real respect. Fredro, even with his own past frustrations, said the same thing everyone else did. DMX was dangerous. Not in a bad way, but because you never knew what he was going to do next. And that unpredictability was exactly what made DMX different from everybody else. You couldn't play chess with a man who didn't even follow the same rule book. Fredro tried to go bar for bar, threat for threat, and DMX responded by simply walking away. And somehow, that walk away hit harder than any diss track ever could. By the time the drama faded, Fredro had moved on. Onyx dropped new music, stayed busy, kept pushing forward. Meanwhile, DMX's battles turned inward. Addiction problems, bankruptcy filings, probation issues. The world could see plain as day he wasn't acting tough. His whole life was a non-stop fight just to stay afloat. Looking back, the irony hits heavy. DMX wasn't mocking Fredro out of hate. He was pointing out something deeper. There was a gap between image and real experience. Between a man performing danger and a man who had to live inside it every single day. Fredro's world was built on Hollywood sets, tours, scripts, and cameras. DMX's world was built on courtroom benches, rehab centers, late-night crises, and survival mode. The same week, people were laughing about the Moesha gangster line. DMX was dealing with real problems, paying millions in court-ordered damages to Monique Wayne, owing the IRS almost $700,000, and trying to fight an addiction that started when someone slipped something into his first blunt at 14. So when people called DMX a reality gangster, it wasn't a diss. It was the truth. His life was the real thing, with real stakes, real consequences, and real scars. Fans saw the difference instantly. That's why, when Fredro later said there was no beef, people respected it. Both men said what they needed to say, but only one man's silence carried the weight of everything he'd survived. DMX never needed a closing statement. His life had already spoken louder than any bar. Years later, when Fredro finally sat down in interviews and looked back on those old memories, his voice held something different. Not anger, but gratitude. He talked about the late 90s, when Onyx had moved out to Jersey but spent so much time in Harlem, people thought they lived there. One day they heard DMX was shooting the Rough Riders anthem video right up the street. Without even thinking twice, they pulled up, hopped out the Jeep, and joined the madness. DMX handed them Rough Riders shirts, and suddenly Onyx were on top of the trucks in one of the most legendary rap videos of the whole era. Fredro smiled telling that story, and you could feel it. Under all the tension, the pride, the egos, the misunderstandings, there was still history. Real history. That day wasn't business. It wasn't competition. It was hip-hop in its purest form. Loud, raw, unplanned, and real. We was just showing love, Fredro said, and DMX accepted that love the same way he gave everything else in his life. Straight from the heart. Fredro and DMX ended up spending a lot of time around each other after that moment, and looking back, it makes perfect sense. DMX wasn't just another rapper from that era, he was a whole force of nature. The kind of person whose presence hit the room before he even opened his mouth. Sticky Fingers once said when DMX walked in, it felt like the air itself changed. Thicker, heavier, alive. DMX didn't need an entourage or a wall of security. Fredro always said the same thing. X would pull up to video shoots alone. Just him and his dog. No driver, no hype team, nothing. He'd stay all day, never complain, never posture. That told you more about who he really was than any verse he ever recorded. So when DMX passed in April 2021, the shock cut deep. He was only 50. A heart attack, tied to years of pain and addiction, finally silenced one of hip-hop's rawest, most powerful voices. The whole world felt that hit. Not just fans, but peers, rivals, people who had once gone toe-to-toe with him. The energy around his loss was enormous, and Fredro Starr made sure to honor him right. He dropped a tribute track titled R.I.P. DMX. No theatrics, no defensiveness, just pure love. Fredro called X special, someone whose pain and connection to God were unlike anything he'd ever seen. When Fredro speaks about DMX now, you can hear it in his voice. The jokes fade, the ego fades, and what's left is real respect. Love is love, Fredro said in his last interview about X, his tone sounding more like a eulogy than a quote. He said this whole hip-hop thing feels like a movie, and X was one of the realest characters in it. By the end, all the rivalry, all the tension, all the back and forth, it became background noise. What lasted was the music, the energy, and the legacy. Two warriors from the same era, fighting the same battles, finally seeing each other for what they truly were, reflections of the same fire. If you're still here watching, drop a comment, hit that like button, share this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.